Thank you very much for joining us on the Photo Flunky Show, episode number 8. 80. Wow, 80.
I know.
Today we're going to be talking about how to stop hating your own portraits. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is William Beem.
Hey, my name is Lee Beem.
And when we say about stop hating your own portraits, we don't mean the portraits you take of others. We mean the portraits that you're in when you're on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, that kind of sucks for many of us. Unless you're 15, where you've grown up with taking hundreds of photos of yourself.
It works for our daughter. But before we get into that topic, I want to say happy anniversary to my wife, Lee. This show is coming out on our anniversary, and I just want to say thank you so much. Happy anniversary, and I love you.
I love you, sweetheart. This is just perfect.
Okay.
It really is.
I'm glad. I would have hated it if you'd come back and said, well, really, you just ruined the show.
You know me well enough.
All right, everybody. Show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 80. There'll be a transcript of the show there for free. And of course, there'll be links to subscribe there. And on photoflunky.com, we have a player so you can listen to this and all the other shows. All right, let's get down to the portraits. Why do people who are in front of the camera, not everybody, because there's some people that really love the way they look, and I wish I were one of them.
Yes.
I really wish I were one of them, but I'm not. Why do people tend to hate their own portrait? You've seen me a number of times. We've set up and done our own little in-house portrait shoots, and I'll sit and look at myself. Oh my God, I look like that.
I know you just never used any of them. We've done them a few times. You've never processed the photos.
I process them, then I look and say, I can't do that.
I know.
Well, let's start off with self-conscious issues. I mean, people are much more, they're hard on themselves than they are to something else. So something that you wouldn't look twice at somebody else, you accept easily. You see in your own photograph that something you say, oh no, I can't put that out there. Everybody will be staring at this.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll tell you, that's really not the case. There's very rarely have I seen someone, who's pointing out at somebody's portrait, it's like, oh, look at this, or look at that feature, or look at this imperfection. Generally speaking, people look at a photo and say, okay, that's so-and-so.
Something that leads to self-conscious issues in photos specifically that doesn't seem to apply so much to the younger generation is the frequency of putting yourself in the position for photos. If I look back, I mean, everyone gets the typical passport photo thing. We've all had to go through it, or most of us have. And I know that, from 16, I looked at my passport photo and I was criticizing this, or maybe my complexion, or, imperfections on my skin. But there's always something, and you think it's the worst photo ever. And then 10 years later, you're 10 years older and you have another one done. Suddenly the last one wasn't so bad.
Yeah, the last photo's like, why can't it look like this one? This one was great.
Exactly. But I think this is for those of us who are not confident with being in front of a camera. We don't do them often enough. And I think when you're doing it regularly, which is what I see with the younger generation who are more comfortable taking photos of themselves every day, you kind of grow with yourself and seeing yourself. You don't see the then and now comparison. Do you think that plays a part in it?
It is. And part of this is because we know our own insecurities and we kind of embellish them in our mind. In my case, years ago, I used to work out at the gym 6 days a week. Well, not maybe always at the gym, but I would work out 6 days a week, whether it was cardio or weights and stuff like that. I was in good shape and I was happy with myself. I had an injury in the gym and I stopped working out. I've gained weight. And I look at my photos now, inside my mind, I feel like I did when I was in great shape. I look at my photo and think, that's not me. That can't be me. But just to show you that I'm willing to get over my own self-conscious issues, by the time this podcast comes out, we have a new portrait of Lee and I that will be on the front page of williambeem.com. So you can go there and see this, and you'll probably look at it and say, oh, that's a couple. I'm looking at it thinking, please don't hate me. Please don't hate me.
Well, I'm the same. And I mean, I take photos of myself daily. Most of the days it has my face in them, not always, for my own little social media and website.
Yes, because she's still working out 6 days a week.
I am. But, in spite of that, I have self-conscious issues because, there are other things that come in. I'm older now. And a lot of the people who are posting things like this are in their 20s or maybe their early 30s. And I'm a lot older than that. But it's helped me accept that I am not 30. I don't have to look like that. I don't have to look like I'm 30. But I think I look pretty good for somebody in the mid-40s.
I think you look great. And honestly, you're taking your photos just after you get through with a run. Most people, want to go through hair and makeup and wardrobe and all this other stuff. You're coming back sweaty and taking a photo.
I am no makeup, no hairbrush, and I don't brush my hair because it's dark when I leave, so who cares? And nobody's going to try and mug me if I look like a hobo.
But you're putting these out there because that's exactly what your audience is doing as well. They're going out running, they're getting sweaty, and that's kind of like your social proof, like, yes, I'm doing this.
I'm real, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that we're bringing this topic up is not so much that we expect that all of you are taking selfies with your DSLRs, but if you are doing portraits, we want you to put some of these ideas in your mind about how your subjects may feel. Because if you spend some time on the other side of the camera, which we did recently, we set up the home studio and we did our family photo shoot, right down to the dogs.
Yes.
And the dogs were not self-conscious about the way they looked.
No, please. No, not at all.
But, each one of us looked at it and we found something in it. Even our daughter's 15 years old. She takes selfies all the time. And she looks beautiful in her selfies, I think. But when we showed her the photos that we took, in a studio environment, she came back and she said, "Oh, no."
A studio environment is a little bit more intimidating. I mean, you saw me. I am not comfortable when somebody's taking a picture of me.
She was quite comfortable while we were taking the photos.
Yeah.
It was afterward that, she saw some things and it was some she really loved and some she thought, "Oh, I don't like that angle. I don't like that." And it's because she couldn't see herself at the moment the shutter was clicking.
That's also part of it.
And that's part of it is your portrait subject is trusting you to capture these photos. They can't see themselves and how they look, so they can't adjust just perfectly before they snap the photo. And I think if you're working with a younger generation that is used to holding up a smartphone and snapping their own photos, they're putting a lot of trust in you, and that's going to be something that they may be conscious of when you deliver it. They could have a great time in the studio, and then you deliver it, and they said, "Oh, that's not the way I would have shot this."
Yeah.
The biggest issue I think that comes up is people are not used to looking at other people in photographs where you're frozen in time, and particularly if you have studio lights or if you have flash, the way it hits your skin just brings out every imperfection that you may have. You will see things that you'll never notice when you're talking to someone in person.
Well, that's something else. I mean, I know when I take a photo of myself, there are some things that come with age. There are some things that are advantages or disadvantages, and there are advantages to having some extra body fat for photos. And I deal with the opposite end of the spectrum with that. But I think you kind of get used to how to pose and what angles to use when somebody else is taking the photo. It's like you say, you have to trust them.
Well, if you look at imperfections, let's talk about on the face. There are people who, depending on the angle of the light and how the quality of the light, whether it's hard or soft, it's going to enhance wrinkles on someone's face. If you see them in normal light, whether indoors or outdoors, very rarely are you going to see shadows develop on creases in the face or wrinkles that are as harsh as you can, even with a softbox on your subject.
That's true. And also in real life, somebody's moving continuously. So you're not seeing those little marks and wrinkles and curves and creases for more than a split second because they're in motion. It's part of movement. When you're looking at a photograph, it's frozen little moments.
Exactly. And you can sit there and study it, which you wouldn't do to somebody in person. So if they have skin tags, if they have like maybe discoloration in your face. So for example, when I looked at my own portraits, Lee pointed out on one of my cheeks, it was much redder than the other cheek, and it just didn't seem right. So those are things that you have to go back and correct. And it might be something that you want to consider before you show these photos to your clients. When you're trying to select what you do, maybe you want to do some editing in there to kind of get rid of some of those imperfections in the final selects that you show them, with the selects that you show them, so that they can come up with the final images that they want. Because you want them to look at their photos as the best they can be. You don't necessarily want to show them anything where you've made a mistake or you've made them look unflattering.
Well, here's the other thing. You sit there with your DSLR, which has a really high resolution. You've got a lens, you've got the studio lights on. It is showing detail absolutely perfectly. You take a photo with a smartphone, even one of the newer ones with a really capable camera lens, you're not getting that same kind of detail. You're not seeing every pore and every little mark on yourself.
Well, what's happening is the lighting is doing that as well. If you're using a flash or a strobe, you're really going to see every pore on their skin. If you're outside and you're using available light, or even indoor light, it's just available light, whether you know it or not, you're probably going to have a little bit less of that happening. You're not going to have the same shadows. You're not going to have the light just creeping into every little contour of the surface of their skin. If I take a photo of you, or as I did last week, and even when you took the photos of me, with that, I've got a big 53-inch Octa softbox. It's beautiful quality of light, but yet it still shows up every little pore on my face. and I see these little bumps that I never knew that I had, because I look in the mirror and I think, okay, I'm a good looking guy.
No, I'm a girl. I know I have them. So
Well, guys,
I'm just thinking, how bad is it making them look?
guys can look at themselves and say, hey, I look good.
Yeah.
Some of us anyways. But it's because I'm taking a glance. You're actually analyzing.
I do, but I think women do analyze because look, I don't wear makeup in everyday life, but if I'm going somewhere, I'm spending time very close up, paying attention to every flaw on my face. I think you get to know where the flaws are. And certainly from years and years of having a job where I was expected to be impeccably presented, you learn to cover those imperfections.
Another thing that bothers people, and this is on both ends of the spectrum, is their weight. Some people think that they're too heavy, and I would fall in that category. And some people think that they're too skinny. And it's just, you can't necessarily assume the way that you look at your subject that they judge themselves the same way. I look at some people that I think, all right, they're slender, they're thin. I envy them very much. And they're thinking instead, it's like, oh, I'm going to look skinny. I'm going to look sick. I'm going to have harsh angles on my collarbone, because the light's going to cast a shadow that most people don't see.
Yep, that's me. I really struggle with that. And it is one of the things that makes me self-conscious in photographs. I usually dress accordingly to cover up things like collarbones and skin creases. It also, because I have low body fat, my veins show. As soon as I drop my hands and the blood starts flowing down, you can see the veins down my arms and into my hands. And you'll notice most of my photos, if you ever look at pictures of me, I don't really like to have my hands in display, except when I'm not thinking about it.
And I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I've gained weight, and I look at my face and it's much rounder than I remember it being. And the other part that goes with that, even being older, is you end up getting that double chin. So there's like a couple of tricks you can do to try and, stick your chin forward. But after a certain amount of weight, that just doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah. Also, if you stick your tongue up on the palate of your mouth.
Really? I didn't know that one.
It pulls, like when people swallow, you see that underneath their chin rises, it contracts. So that's another, yeah.
Oh, you should have given me that one when we were shooting.
I didn't actually think of it. It's a girl thing that I read once. I've never used it because I try and look a little bit rounder than I am.
See, you're here to learn. The other thing is creases and wrinkles aren't just on the face. Sometimes the pose that your subject has, even with someone who's young and fit and has every advantage to their body, can turn their neck or turn their waist and get a bunch of creases or wrinkles in that turn that just really don't look flattering.
Absolutely. I mean, I have that problem and I'm very self-conscious of it. I've actually learned that for some reason I seem to favor the left side of my face for photos, and I don't know why. There's nothing that bugs me more on the right than the left. I also have learned to drop my left shoulder and to pull it back slightly because it just sort of slightly reduces the creases and wrinkles. I'm not 20. My skin makes little folds. So as soon as I turn my head in one direction, you're going to see it.
See, I'm looking at you now. I don't see any folds, but then again, you're not posing.
I'm not. I don't pose very well either.
There are some things that you as a photographer do that can make things worse for your subject. And there are two of them I want to bring up. One is bad or unflattering light. In other words, you're not matching the light to your subject. Some people do well under harsh light. It shows off their physique. Some people do bad under harsh light because it shows off their physique. Soft light is appropriate for circumstances as well as hard light, and it's up to you to judge which is appropriate for your subject in the context where you're shooting them.
Yeah.
The other one I want to bring up is lens distortion. We did all of our shots with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens, pretty much at 200 millimeters.
Yes.
And that is a very flattering look. It gives a lot of compression to your face. And we've noticed that if you're taking something with medium to wide angle views, it's great if you're trying to show a background, but if you're just doing a portrait, it's really unflattering to your face because it kind of curves your head in a way that's
unnatural.
It makes your hairline kind of recede. It makes your forehead stand out. Whatever is closer to the lens is going to be larger. Now, it's great for comic relief.
Yes.
It's great for exaggeration. But if you're trying to do a flattering portrait of somebody, you really want to be, I would say, 100, 105 millimeters or greater. And that's knowing that a lot of people like an 85 millimeter prime lens as a portrait lens. I don't see that as, I do love my 85 millimeter lens, but you know what? I don't shoot my portraits with it.
Yeah.
I'll shoot maybe a half body with that and an environment behind somebody. But if I'm just going to be shooting like we did, we put up a roll of seamless paper and we did our shoots on that. Our living room is long enough that we can stand, a few feet back and shoot at 200 millimeters. Lens distortion. Every lens is going to have some distortion, so choose the lens that's going to have flattering distortion instead of unflattering distortion.
Yes.
That's pretty much our list that we wanted to go through. There are plenty of other things that might be able to cause some people to hate their own portrait. And really, the reason that we're doing this is we're suggesting that you get in the other side of the camera. Have some of your own portraits taken. Have someone take portraits of you and get in touch with your feelings.
Yep. See, I think when you can relate to how somebody feels, it's easier to communicate about how you want them to think.
I was almost feeling like Obi-Wan Kenobi there. Reach out with your feelings.
Ooh.
But I think it is really a good experience to do. And if you're a portrait photographer, I'd recommend that you do it, not frequently, but every so often, like, maybe every quarter, every 3 months. Get on the other side. Have some people take photos of you. See how you feel when it's taking place. See how you feel when the photos come back. And you might learn something from the photographer who's taking the portraits that maybe gives you a better idea, helps you relate to the photos, or maybe makes you feel comfortable. And then you can learn from them as well how your subjects how you're going to treat your subjects and how you're going to let them feel.
That's very true. And I think just because the model is used to having, or subject is perhaps used to having a photo taken, doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely comfortable. They might project that. You want it to be real because it's going to make a difference. I mean, I'm used to taking a photo of myself every day. You saw how much I struggled. I mean, I just cringe and it takes me a long time to warm up. I'm not a natural for posing and relaxing in front of a camera. I'm just not.
I thought your photos were beautiful, but I know exactly what you feel because I was on the other side when you were taking portraits of me. I don't know how I look, so I'm trusting you. And this is the kind of thing that as a photographer, you're not just there taking the photo. You have to be looking at everything. You've got to be looking to make, is their hair right? Is there anything on their clothing? Are there wrinkles in some places? Because I looked at some of the photos where I thought, you know what? I didn't even notice the wrinkles on these t-shirts while I was shooting the photos. In Photoshop, I've got to go back there with Liquify to kind of, even out the angles. And it's nothing that was, we're taking somebody's arm in or anything like that. It was just that the clothing was wrinkled. And when you look at it in a photo, you notice something that you didn't notice if you were talking to a person.
And it's a distraction you don't want.
No, when you've got a photo and it's frozen in time, you want to eliminate those distractions. So if you want to save yourself some time in Photoshop, you need to be looking at every little thing. In other words, don't put the camera up to your face until you're ready to pull the trigger. You need to look at every little thing. You need to make sure the expression is just right. You need to make sure the pose is just right. The hair is in the right place. The light is falling in the right place. And the clothing is not wrinkled or hitched up. Or, I saw a photo with somebody that I thought looked really great until I realized somebody's underwear was sticking out of a spot. And I thought, okay, that's either going to be a lot of Photoshop or we're going to throw that photo away. But sometimes you don't see things until after you've taken them. And I'd recommend, if you can, do some tethering. Get this on a large screen. So like maybe your laptop, or if you can, a desktop with a screen there. And as you're shooting, review the photos, because then you can see what's happening, and review them with your subject because they want to know what's happening too.
Yeah, I think that's very important, is having them involved in the selection process and sort of figuring out if there's anything they want to change in the way that they're presenting.
And sometimes it's a pain to set up, the tethering and do that, but I think it's worth it. The times that we don't, that I've taken the photograph over to a model or a subject and said, here's what it looks. We all say, oh, that's great. That looks good. You're looking at that tiny screen. You're not seeing little imperfections.
Yeah.
Tethering is probably something that you can do that will help people take better portraits, or help you take better portraits of your subjects so that they don't come back later. Or worse yet, you don't have to go to them and say, I didn't really get a good shot. Thank you very much for listening to the Photo Flunky Show. Show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 80. And as I said before, this is the anniversary show. So happy anniversary, Lee.
Happy anniversary, honey.
You'll find a transcript of the show there for free. And of course, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play Music, and others. You'll find links on the show notes page. Have a good week, everybody. We'll see you here again next week.